To me, my X-Men, it's time for the old switcheroo where we're normally talking gaming retro with Mike and Jaymo.
I'm not Mike.
But I'm still Jaymo. Normally, we focus on our epic quest to research and review all 200 plus games in the Nintendo Switch Online Retro Catalog. But today, I'm very excited to present you with episode one of a new side series that we are calling the Old Switcharoo Screentime. Here we'll give you our rants, raves, and reviews from the world of film and television. Mike unfortunately could not join us today, but I'm still very excited to be joined by my longtime friend and cosplay influencer extraordinaire, Bryan Lee. How you doing, Bryan?
Hello. You flatter me. Yeah.
It's it's
I,
it's
don't, I
impressive.
wouldn't count myself as influencer per se, but thank you.
You're
I
definitely
appreciate it.
extraordinaire though. Like
Oh,
the
thank you.
cosplays you have put together, they're truly impressive and very clever.
Oh,
You've
thank
been a
you.
cosplayer for over 2 decades at this point, and you've been spotted at Comic-Con, Star Wars celebrations, and major Hollywood premieres dressed up as everything from DC's Nightwing to Short Round from the Indiana Jones series. And I don't think I've ever asked you, as long as I've known you, do you have a favorite cosplay you do?
Oh, that's like picking a favorite child, right?
Do you have a favorite child?
Uh, no, I just mean that, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, just given that so many of them I see as so much more than just the costume that I'm wearing, but also like for example, Nightwing, I surely wouldn't have been able to do that. Like, which is that would, by the way, is probably my most ambitious build that I ever did. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without the enormous help of my friend Malachi, who did the bulk of the building of it, and my friend
Right.
Lisa, who we worked together on all of it. And so it's also the memory of that build because that costume is so cumbersome to wear. I don't even like to think about it.
It took you guys
Um,
weeks. It's like movie quality.
Oh, thank you. Ultimately, that's one of the things that I remember initially being annoyed how often people would mistake my costume. Even in moments where they're complimenting it in person, they were like, I realized a lot of people assumed that we took the UD replicas bat suit, a suit that's worth like a replica that's worth thousands of dollars, and then just
Right.
repainted it. So of course, initially I just found that annoying because I was like, well, we worked hard on this, but I was like, well, that's actually a really big compliment that they just thought that I shelled out thousands of dollars for some replica. And it's like, no, we made this from scratch.
And
So,
we'll try to post a link to it if it can be seen somewhere online, but it's
that's so good.
phenomenal. It's so, truly
Thank
great.
you.
Well, I
But
was
then I
so
guess in terms of a favorite, I just think I don't know. Like, well, uh, I don't know. Ultimately, that I like Nightwing was it was a favorite because of the build process per se. But
right.
there's a lot of other ones that I think I have more fun uh doing, like what I'm wearing right now, which is not a full cosplay per se, but also what you're wearing, our
Let's talk about it. This is
our
what I dress
X-Men
like every
son,
day
uh,
with
Professor
the
Xavier, of course.
psychic powers. Well,
Yeah.
I was so blessed and honored to be your plus one to the X-Men 97 fan event at Disney's El Capitan Theater on March 13th. We got to watch the first three episodes of Disney's long-awaited revival of the acclaimed X-Men animated series with members of the cast and crew in attendance. In fact,
And I do want to interject that I was honored to take you because you're my
oh,
like OG X-Men buddy. Well, I did also invite my sister as well because we grew up watching the show together, and I know she really was hoping to make it out to it, but unfortunately she lives rather far, has kids, a scientist with all this, like it would very it'd be a lot of ordeal. We're lucky enough to live relatively close to Hollywood, but also like we go way back, you and me, to like I remember how much we nerded out over the whole run of the Fox X verse, which good God, it's 24 years now, and
that's
we're still
wild.
getting and we're still
Yeah.
getting another movie in it technically out of Deadpool and Wolverine this year. So
I think we actually probably bonded over our love of the first X-Men movie because I remember I saw the first X-Men movie by myself at a matinee the first day it was out. So we didn't see it together, but I'm pretty sure
no,
we
we
saw
didn't.
X2 together.
Yeah, well, I mean, because like I think because we sort of we became friends over. I think I think the only class we first shared was in junior high was journalism. I think
Yeah,
we kind of we became more friends kind of earlier in high school. But yeah, I think
right.
I don't even really remember how I first saw the first X-Men movie, but I remember like nerding out with you about with like it was the beginning of that franchise and also the beginning of that modern era of being obviously we'd had you know, in our time and also a little bit before our time, the Christopher Reeve and Michael Keaton Batman, Superman movies. But then we hadn't really seen, other than what Roger Corman, couple movies here and there. But yeah, it was just I have a lot of memories with you just like nerding out over the X-Men franchise, and I just wouldn't have dreamed going to this without you there. So
I
especially
mean,
over
it,
the return of this show, yeah.
it's a dream come true. This was my my three fandoms as a young man. The very first one was strange. I was King Kong fan before anything. Then came Ghostbusters and that animated series, and then this was like my last real big fandom for a long time. So it was this dream come true. We got
Now,
to meet Lenore Zan. She's responsible for the voice of Rogue and the sexual awakening of countless teens back in the 90s. We'll
yeah,
post a picture here of Brian and I getting to meet her. She was just a delight. The El Capitan staff, they did a phenomenal job hosting us. That theater was packed full of mutants, and they kept it running really well.
oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. I loved how they, especially kind of the theming. They knew their audience and they knew the people who grew up with the show, like right down to the seeing that Saturday morning breakfast cereal station. you know,
yeah,
yeah,
and
they definitely knew their stuff.
and then Hot Pockets, and it was just so 90s and just
Yeah,
it just got me perfectly in the mood to see Brian new X-Men animated series episodes.
I
Um
know.
I was beside myself all night. I
Mm.
cried, you know that. You cried a little bit too, a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we had
Now
each
that
other to shoulders to cry on as we were like, oh my God, this is how emotional we were getting just watching this incredible, as much as it is a brand new series, it is spiritually in every way, a sequel to the show we grew up on, and right down to the how bold they are with the name X-Men '97. This is the next year after that finale we got back in 1996.
Yeah. And I'm beside myself. I'm so happy it's getting received well by the people who've seen the preview of it, and they're really hyping it up and saying like this is it. Now that you've had a few days to sit with it, the general overall spoiler-free take on it, what's your kind of impression as far as like it compares to the rest of the X-Men stuff, or how's it sitting with you?
I mean, I know you and I were both very taken with the show in so many ways that night, and I just, none of that has really waned. If anything, I'm just itching to get to see it again because, we're at least when we're recording this, we're still a couple of days out from when it drops, or at least the first two episodes are going to drop on Disney Plus. We've
Yeah.
seen three, so we got to wait a little bit longer before we see new ones. But I'm just also just really excited to see those episodes again because, like, in so many ways, it just felt, you know, and not just because it was a direct sequel to the show we grew up on, but it also just felt like one of the best representations of the X-Men as a whole in any
Yeah.
medium that we've gotten. Like it it they very smartly knew that those old generation of us who grew up with the show who would wanted to see who would love to see a show like this that just sort of continues their adventures, but also just take that opportunity to give them a little bit of a glow up, and um,
Yeah.
there's so much in so many granular ways. It just felt like a step up, like the how much it ramps up the drama, the action, the animation. Um, yeah, just I just man, I can't wait for more people to be able
It's
to see it so that we can
a
all
10.
talk about
It's a 10 out
it.
of 10.
Yeah,
It's crazy. I I
yeah,
I, I think the secret sauce of X-Men 97 is going to be that X-Men have always felt this cool in our imaginations. The
yeah,
old 90s series had such an iconic look. It was so colorful, but by today's standards, the action, the fight choreography, it doesn't really hold up to what we expect. Then you have the live action movies, which do have that. They do have the live action, amazing choreography, big budget set pieces, the Nightcrawler scene. But it didn't
sure,
look like this. It wasn't as playful and colorful and comic booky. So you have like the
yeah,
best of both worlds with this new stuff. If you have the old look, but you have a very modern feeling like superhero story. Um,
right. You're right, and
it's
the films would at times, as we know, with most people, the general opinions will vary, but the films have been kind of hit or miss, certainly, and but there were times where, especially over the time that um, comic book movies became more popular, and there became more of an appetite for films that would still take themselves very seriously as adaptations, but also embrace the comic book unique, the colors, infamously that first X-Men movie makes that quip that the audience laughed along with back then
right.
about how, like, of course they wouldn't be wearing yellow spandex, but now we're like, well, it doesn't have to be spandex, but everyone's excited about seeing the classic colors on Hugh Jackman again. Like so,
Yeah,
or
for
not
Deadpool
again,
3.
like for the first time.
Right.
And I do love that the films have used us glimpses like that. Like I know, for example, X-Men Apocalypse is a bit divisive. I think you actually divide a little bit on our opinions on that.
I don't
But
like
I
that
also,
movie.
well, but even as somebody who does not like that movie, I remember how giddy I felt at that final scene.
Right.
Minor spoilers for X-Men Apocalypse if you haven't gotten to it, but like it basically shows you that like more or less that core X-Men '90s team in bright colors, very very evocative of what you remember them wearing,
Yeah.
and it made me so excited about where they could go from there. And so it's yeah, I think, but at the same time, this show, you're right, this show, it just fully embraces the things that the films would tease us with and reward us with glimpses of. Now it's just like, no, this is just the team as you remember them in the colors you remember them. This is literally them, like with
Yeah.
so many other returning cast, and this is just carrying that story. It's the X-Men as you remember them, but just just given the extra little panache and also like another thought occurred to me. I know we briefly talked about this that night about how like you know um I think about how the older we get, the more that gaps of time don't really feel as long anymore. I still remember when we were in junior high and high school, and me just thinking like, oh my god, it takes 3 years for them to make another Star Wars movie. I feel like wait that long, but but the older you get, the more the older, of course, that's reasonable. Movies take time, whatever, and we're also so spoiled by getting so much great comic book adaptations and stuff like that. Anyways, I'm diverging. Like from my point is that kids these days like haven't really gotten
It's these days.
kids these days. I
Brian,
mean, like
you should just give your first ironic kids these days. We're old men, Brian. But
we're
yeah,
old men. We're old men. Well, I would just you think about how the fact that there's always this kind of studio drive to keep franchises fresh, to always have new entries, and
yeah,
we've always sort of just accepted, oh, of course, that keeps things alive for it keeps younger fans aware of these characters and stuff like that. But when it's been a few years, like that means there's a whole generation of kids now who don't really know X-Men. And I remember
yeah.
talking to you. I know you have your students and saying like, do they even really know X-Men? I mean, the only X-Men movies that have come out in their time have been movies that didn't make that much of an impact, and maybe they didn't see, and
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So I'm just so glad for also the new generation of fans. That because we know we're still probably many years off until um, the MCU gives us their proper Marvel Studios X-Men. And I think like most fans, I want them to take their time to get that right, because there's just
Yeah.
so many characters where they're there for so much potential. Like I want them to do that as a whole saga, maybe. But
I think they will.
anyways,
I think they'll do a good job with it.
yeah. But I just in the meantime, I'm just so glad that kids will have this.
It's great.
As much as it's like this show is clearly made for that millennial generation who grew up with that original show. This is such a like excellent representation of the characters for a new generation that you can totally just dive into this, because a lot of those, even the original show was very episodic in that way. Like, I mean, I think it was also revolutionary as one of those first kind of kids comic book shows that rewarded you for watching it all because of how much serialized storytelling there was. But you
Yeah.
can also really jump in anywhere. And I actually only kind of recently became aware that there's a completely huge difference in the production order and the release order of those
Yeah, you
episodes.
can tell towards the
Yeah,
end
you
of
can
the
totally tell.
90s series, the storyline get a little strange. Like the second to last episode is Mr. Sinister's backstory. So like, if that doesn't
And
tell
he's
you
like a
things got
villain from
weird.
season 2 onward, so like they don't even bother. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
and yeah,
So let's get to our main segment for today's episode then. We're going to give 10 spoiler-free ways that X-Men 97 X-Ceeded our expectations. I was going to get excited in there, but I was like, that's too many X's. I can
no,
start
it's
off.
funny.
I think the intro to X-Men 97, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the legacy of the old 90s show is very much due to the banger intro. Like it's
Oh yeah,
so good that they're using hints of that theme in modern Marvel movies. It was in Ms. Marvel. It was, a little bit, I think, at
yeah,
the end of the Marvels. And but so I was almost certain they were going to use that music again, or at least a version of it. But I
right.
didn't expect them to reanimate everything. I don't know why that was such a
Right.
delight for me, but
Mm.
seeing the character intros and then the intros for characters we've seen before but never had their proper, celebration moment. So you got like Bishop
Yeah.
and Morph in the intro now, and it's rad. And then they have these quick little cutaways to old episodes or future
Mm.
teases. I
Yeah.
loved the intro, even though
No,
it
I
didn't have
agree.
the previously on X-Men.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think pretty much that's probably I don't think it's hyperbole to say it's probably um, fans of that show talk about that theme song more than anything, how
So hype.
iconic that was. And I still remember the day that Disney Plus went live, um, and knowing that they were putting the
The old
entire
X-Men
X-Men
show.
animated series on there. That's I still remember that was the first thing I booted up. I'm not start playing season one of this, and I remember distinctly seeing that little icon thing, skip intro. I'm like, fuck that.
No way. You don't skip that intro. So the new
No, no,
intro, just as good, if not better. It's
well,
phenomenal.
what's so great about it is that it's I think it's probably a new orchestration of it, but it's the same exact intro that you remember, just given a fresh new animation, obviously presented in widescreen, which is
Yeah.
also
Oh,
by the way one of the things I love about like that we're getting to glimpse this universe that we're so used to seeing in that standard 4:3 boob tube kind of style, and now and obviously we're a little what do I call it
older than some kids, like they don't know the boob tubes.
well, no, that we got the incredible advantage of getting to experience these episodes in a theater, but
Oh
but uh,
yeah.
but then getting to just see this like the opening credits in widescreen, like like obviously it's like things like get scaled a little differently, so that they like that ending where you see like the X-Men and Magneto's mutants is like crashing into each other. It just feels so much more like an epic version of the opening credits exactly as you remember them. I don't know if
Right.
like I'm putting that to words well.
No,
Like
no, yeah.
yeah, but you're right. Yeah, it just it's exactly as you remember, just given that modern shine, and it's
Yeah, the
oh my
polish.
god, like I think they knew that they had to get those opening credits right.
But I mean, anyone who was at the event, give a like or leave a comment if you agree. Hearing that theme song from the El Capitan sound system,
Oh my
it,
god.
it filled my essence, Brian. I was a flashing like beacon of light. So that's number
Oh
one, the
yeah.
intro. Can you
Well,
give us number two?
I do want to touch on something you mentioned, because I think a lot of people are expecting that little previously on, and I
Yeah,
was kind of too. Ultimately, having seen it, like I'm glad, because at least as we saw it, we don't know if maybe Disney Plus will add something like that, but I'm pretty sure we saw it as it will be presented. They don't really have those little previously on, but I think in part it works because like even for people who are new to this, it'll fill in whatever you needed to remember from the previous finale, and at the same time, like lest we forget, those kind of things were kind of ways for them to save on animation. Like if it just means we get more show because we don't get
right.
these like remember all this stuff, yeah, I'm fine. Like it like as best as I remember, it just jumps you right into the opening credits as you remember,
Yeah.
and just oh my god, it gets your blood pumping. Anyways, we gotta get moving. So yeah,
That's
go
all
on
good.
anyway.
Yeah. So number one is the intro. Can you give us number two of a way that this exceeded our expectations?
I did kind of touch on this a bit, like from my list already, but just getting to see that widescreen that widescreen look of this universe that we're so used to seeing, so boxy, and also just how much they use that opportunity to really showcase beautiful new animation, like you're not only just getting it in such a cinematic way, but the yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe unless you actually see it. I know, like you can attest to this too, that the action sequences just have a flair to them that just look just gorgeous. I can't wait to just rewatch some of these action sequences just because of how beautiful the animation looks. And bless their hearts, the animators for the original show just never quite wowed you in that level because they didn't really have the budget and the means to showcase, in the way that they can now. Oh my god,
It's
I
stunning.
can't wait for
It's
people to see
just
that Sentinel fight.
Yeah, Fong mentioned that it looks 90s but not too 90s, and I think that's the perfect way to
Yeah,
describe the animation because it feels nostalgic. And there are shots where like characters are talking and you see like, oh, like just kind of their mouth is moving. This doesn't feel like modern standards, but I think it was very well done and that it wasn't too much, that it
yeah.
made you kind of bother. You didn't feel kitschy or anything. But I remember the first action sequence, you and I were literally gasping because
Mm,
of the kinetic energy and the fluid motion and the fight choreography. It just looks so good when the X-Men start, getting in gear and that theme song kicks in. Oh,
right.
sick animation.
And just the creativity too of just, that they have to essentially choreograph all of this, and I think they knew that the most fun that you can do when the X-Men are in action are when they're working as a team in really
Yeah,
creative ways. and
right.
and there are so many moments like that that just wow you, and then suddenly another one is being thrown at you, and just like, yeah, the action looks gorgeous, and they use that widescreen to beautiful effect.
Yeah, and you know someone who like did background work on the animations, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah. No, a friend of mine who I know would probably rather be unnamed, but I
oh,
know yeah, she did. I'm so I mean, I can't wait to pick her brain
yes.
about the work that she did on this, just because I know she been painting on the backgrounds of this whole season. And I know, like, that night she was, we ran into her at the print, but I know that night she was texting me, what do you guys think? And I was just gushing to her so much, like, Jeremy and I were crying. Like,
It's it's one of
this
those
is
like
like the best
every
X-Men thing.
every
Yeah.
frame of painting kind of moments. There are these moments. There's a scene that takes place in space, and
Mm.
the way that the space and planet Earth is drawn, but then also presented to the audience through the character who's up there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful
Yeah.
animation accompanying beautiful, powerful moments. And yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Animation's amazing.
Like,
Number
even like
three.
the moments when like Cyclops would use his powers. So sorry, but
Nope, do
like
it.
you would just feel like the physics of it almost, like just
Yeah.
the force of his blows, and just the way, like, oh my god, yeah,
Well,
it's
it's funny because
incredible
you
in that
mentioned
line.
you mentioned Cyclops specifically because that first Cyclops fight was jaw dropping, and I
Mm.
realize it's because they've made his beams affect him physically now. It
Yeah,
is pushing him as much as it is knocking things away, which scientifically makes sense, I think. But
yeah,
the
like
old
you see a little bit of recoil almost.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
uses that. I won't spoil how he does it, but he uses that to his combat advantage, and it's freaking amazing. And I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like up until this point, his beam has always felt separate from him. And now it's like, oh, this is like an extension. This is almost a limb that he can use to like reach around and snap things and push himself. It's so
Yeah.
good.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of what I guess it, like, I feel like that's an extension of the beauty of the animation. Is that these subtle little things that just make you feel like, it gives a little bit extra oomph, I guess, to the power. It gives it like a physical realness, I guess.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you're right. Before it's almost like Cyclops is just the on and off, but now you
Yeah.
can, like, feel the force of it, and like, yeah.
Super sick. For my number three, I wrote TV 14, which is what it's being rated on Disney Plus. One of the
Ah,
things I liked about the old series is that it felt like more than a kid's show. It felt adult. Things were dramatic. Characters struggled with romance and trauma. And X-Men 97, based on the first three episodes, it only leans more heavily into adult themes and imagery.
I
There were
agree.
some, yeah,
Surprisingly so, almost. Yeah.
yeah. You had told me about these, trolls on the internet who were complaining that like Rogue's butt has deflated a bit since the 90s. But as someone who's
Right.
seen the show, let me just tell you, don't worry. This show is super sexy. It's super dark. It's very respectful of, the adult audience. And
Yeah.
it did not feel tamed or, censored or anything. It goes
Sure.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think some of that was really just, some of the, vocal minority fanboys raging that, oh no.
Clickbaiting. Yeah.
Well,
Something to
because I
complain
know there's a
about.
couple infamous shots in the original show that, like, oh, that's a rather, like,
Right.
clingy, like,
Voluptuous.
butt shot, or like, yeah, and you can tell it's, the stuff that's very male gazy, but, like, at the same time, it's like, look, you guys don't have to worry about, like, that, like, I mean, for one thing, it's also, at least on the point of, like, Rogue's outfit, for example, like, this show, as much as it's direct continuation, they're calling it 97 because, the show ended in 96, and picks up like 1 year later. They talk
Right.
about like how it's been 1 year since Xavier was gone, and so it affords the character to be a little different than you remember.
Yeah.
I actually really like how like yeah like we touched on how you know, part of what makes that original show so great, and just also just X-Men in general as a franchise, is its relatability. It's themes that are just so universal and apply to so many different kind of class struggles, and it's obviously there's so many ways that the '90s show has become very dated. For better and for worse, I suppose. But part of the reason why, yeah, it's I mean, hell, my sister is introducing my nephews to it right now, and they love it. Like the this stuff still works.
Yeah.
And and even though they were kind of toned down for children, like I know you and I used to joke a lot about how much certain storylines, certain brutal moments in the comics were really kind of watered down, made less terrifying in the show, but anyways, this new show captures that so well, but also I think it surprised me in the ways that it I felt like it knew that its core audience for the most part are now adults, and would afford to see a show that's a little bit more adult, a little bit more touching on themes that maybe the original show might have not quite dared to do, but not too much though. It feels just naturally so, like it knows that this audience has grown up a little and might want to see something a little bit more challenging,
Yeah.
but that it still would be suitable for kids, and I do feel that needs to be touched on, because because there's even a couple of moments, I think you and I agree that in some of the action sequences that legit scared me, like, or at
Yeah.
least in a jump scary kind of way that I don't think the original show ever really would, and I think maybe might be a little intense for the youngest ones.
Yeah, there's some nightmarish scenes involving like the antagonists and
Yeah.
but in a way that I really dug. It felt very 90s, and the 90s animation kids movies were really fun except for that one scene that like scarred you, and like Brave Little Toaster has it and like Disney has it a whole bunch. There
Oh
used to be
man,
this dark
never ending
side.
story. Never ending
Yeah.
story, and also like I feel like a lot of people leave this one out, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh,
I
the
don't know, but
ant.
I don't know
Anthony
about
or
you, man, but
Auntie.
that, yeah, Auntie, when, like, oh my god, I
Maybe
was
the
like, how
most
is,
graphic like death scene
yeah.
in any movie, like, but
And like
so
after, like, he dies defending the kids, and oh my god, like I still like have nightmares about that scorpion.
right, but I do think, like, you have lows that low. I think the highs feel higher, and
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's effective. And I'm gonna do number four if you don't mind, because you already touched on it, the allegorical nature of the show. X-Men,
Mm,
since its inception, it was always a metaphor for the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And now that social justice and political turmoil is on people's mind more than ever, I was happy to see the writers not retreat from potential controversy. Um,
yeah,
some of the imagery is definitely evocative of things we've seen in the news in the past few years. And
agreed. Yeah.
the biggest gut punch scene for me in the first three episodes, it involves a mutant in need being denied treatment by a medical professional.
Oh, yeah,
And it's just and where that scene goes from there is moving and genius, and it's just it's so much goodness. But part of that is
yeah.
because the show's not afraid to go there, and
Yeah,
it
no,
was
I'm
just
glad you mentioned that scene in particular, because it just also shows new facets of things that they obviously were, and thankfully were willing to show in the original show, but um but not quite to that level, and I speak more to
more
like,
direct now.
yeah, because you know how the original show, and a key part of X-Men is the struggle of humans who are bigoted against them, and I know Friends of Humanity is a major part of the original show throughout, and this one. Um, but yeah, like, it's seeing stuff like that, seeing that kind of discrimination of, like, the doctor at the hospital, like refusing to serve mutants who are in dire need, and so and just the emotional gut punch of that, like, yeah, no,
You
I
mentioned
agree. It was,
the Friends of Humanity specifically, and like it
mm,
was actually kind of a dark moment in the theater because like when I saw that I felt like I didn't see that on the news in my country. It felt like this outdated sort of like prominent discrimination, that the civil rights movement had to fight against, and to
Yeah,
try and to try to create an America that is normalized against prejudice. And to now to be watching it and be like, oh, like that feels very familiar. I think I don't know if it's going to open people's eyes, but it definitely, I think, is a more worthwhile and important show for saying something. A lot of kids
yeah.
shows don't say something. This is say something. And you know what? You can disagree with it if you want, but you got to respect the fact that they're trying to say a message that matters. And I thought that the show did a great job with that.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think especially look, we all know and love the late great Stan Lee, and I know how much he proudly talked about how his and Jack Kirby's creations and Steve Ditko and everyone liked that was especially what they meant with these characters is, and nothing highlights that more than the struggle that the X-Men deal with,
Yeah.
and how much that is meant to be allegorical, and the fact that there are certain things in these first few episodes that might remind us of certain moments that are very recent in our news. Some part I wonder if some of that might have just been coincidental too, just given that because I don't know how long it took for them to develop and write these stories, but also just goes to show you how relevant and
Yeah.
necessary stories like these still are, especially among superhero storytelling, and how much X-Men encapsulates those kind of discussions.
Yeah. X-Men matters more than ever, and I'm here for
Yeah,
it. Can you
yeah,
give us
hell
number
yeah.
5?
I do. Well, I want to also highlight just some of the moments that they. I think I even mentioned a bit before about, but also get more specific about creative ways that they did team ups. It's always fun
Combo
to
attacks.
see. Yeah, yeah, and I know one of them was well spoiled in one of the early ads, where you see Wolverine charging a Sentinel, and Gambit gets on his back and charges his claws. Like, it's just, and I remember like it's funny because I had the same thought as the first time I noticed it. Like, oh my god, is Logan about to explode? Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people kind of pointing out like that doesn't make a lot of sense. But you know what? It doesn't have to make sense. It's adamantium. It's indestructible. And just have fun with it. It's like
Yeah.
moments like that where it's just like it remembers to have fun and remembers
Yeah.
to use the characters in really creative ways, especially in combat for that matter, because that's a lot of what these characters in universe are training in the danger room for, like
Yeah.
these little team up moments, these fastball special kind of things, and
But
yeah,
so I guess your number 5 is like the powers and the creative use of them. And so if I can just add on to that, like I love the moments in this show when they're not in combat and their powers are
yeah,
being used in different ways or hindrances in different ways. There's a scene in which Storm talks about how her nature control feels to her. And
mm.
I'm getting goosebumps right now just remembering the scene. It's so well written, so well delivered, and it's
Oh my god,
beautiful and kind of somber. And it's like that is Storm. That is really good chef's kiss
dude,
Storm writing.
absolutely, and that performance, um, her name escapes me right now, but the actress who played Storm, I know
Yes.
she's one of the OG cast members who's back.
We don't remember
And
your
it's
name, and that's a compliment because you are Storm to us. You know what I mean? So
well, no, I'm embarrassed to say because I know I also I know part of the thing is because voice actors don't get recognized as often.
right.
We should remember their names. So I'll make an effort. I know it's something Seeley Smith, I believe. But I know like and I know you and I got to meet the great Lenore Zan, who she's also one of the returning cast members. Voices still voicing Rogue, and obviously you can tell. Because she's probably in her 50s, maybe 60s. Obviously she's aged a bit, but her voice just sounds, it just, you can tell she's just got that perfect southern drawl back, like she's Rogue. She's been wasn't just I think it was like a whole bunch of the games that she was Rogue as well, and obviously she's been a big part of the convention circuit. So I'm just so glad to see some of these characters, some of these actors just embody the characters again. And because I know basically everybody is back, with the exception of, I know the original actor who voiced Cyclops and Magneto have passed,
Right.
but speaking of which, whoever they got to replace him, especially that new guy, Cyclops, he's got his cadence down pat. Like it's like yeah, they. Anyways, this returning cast, it's so great to hear, especially like in Storm's case, just that kind of, I don't know how else to describe it, the almost Shakespearean way that
Yeah, grandiose and
yeah, like they know that, and especially in her case, the practical goddess that she is,
right.
yeah, it's so
Allison
good to hear.
Seeley Smith and Iona Morris. Looks
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, but just so maybe that can be number 6. The
And I
new
think
voice
also
talent.
Eric Bauza, if I recall correctly, I think he's back as Beast. Um,
Oh yeah, that's
I
definitely the same guy.
yeah, I like it. They're great, and also hats off to I believe it's Allison Court, who was the original Jubilee, who chose to step down because she was like, Jubilee ought to be played by a person of color, and
Yeah,
and I think that, and but you wouldn't even really notice because Jubilee still sounds like Jubilee. I think everybody who was stepping into somebody else's role clearly did their their research to, I mean, they're not doing, and I don't think they should be obligated to do perfect imitations, but
right.
they just, they just sound so much like the characters. It'll feel like no time has really passed.
At
It's
all, at all.
yeah,
Just as
yeah,
good as you remember. So we'll say number 6 is the new voice actors. I'm stepping into such iconic roles and totally, doing them justice, doing them honor. Number
yeah.
7, I'm gonna call Morph and Jeez. Because these characters that I used to find annoying and unappealing, like Morph and Gene, they in this new series, they have this relevance and appeal that I don't know if I'm just older and kinder in my heart, but like,
Right.
you and I were joking about like, why is Wolverine so torn up about Morph? He's kind of just he's kind in the original series, he's kind of fridged at the very
No,
beginning.
I'm
And
really glad you bring up Morph, because I feel like in so many ways they've expanded upon and improved that character. Like, well, I mean,
absolutely.
not to knock, like, because there's a lot that they did do really interestingly with Morph in the original series, like that whole season that he's under Mr. Sinister's control. Yeah, but I know like the biggest change with Morph, is his appearance, but at the same time, it makes perfect sense. He's a guy who always changes, who can really morph his appearance, and also like I guess you could still just see it as like he was taking a different face, I guess, in the original series, because when he references that moment, where there's a moment where he references having been under Sinister's control, and he morphs into the face from like season 2.
Yeah.
Little stuff like that. But yeah, like I remember with the original series, like even then, kind of thinking like, who is this guy? Because I knew that Morph was not from the comics,
Yeah, created for the
and
show.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
just
so he changes his face to as a callback.
yeah, it was a nice way of just at least making the new changes to him make sense, so to speak. And also like, yeah, there's little moments like, I know you and I also talked about that moment where, I'm trying to remember the context, where like Morph is like, he's trying to get a rise out of Logan, and at
Right,
some point, like they basically like kind of wrestle a bit, and like at some point he just turns into Sabretooth,
right.
just to get just to get a rise out of Logan. And it's like
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that somebody who is an old friend of his totally would do, and you wouldn't
right.
really see that in the original series. So it almost feels like it's further cementing what they, the character, in a way that the original series never really got an opportunity to do. So
Absolutely. Yeah. This show
yeah,
retroactively makes those old Morph episodes better because they're like, oh, okay,
yeah,
like I get why he likes these guys. And I thought, Jean Grey does not need more storylines. She, half the old series is a Jean Grey storyline, the Phoenix and then Dark Phoenix sagas.
oh
Um,
yeah.
so to get an episode kind of centered around her for episode 3,
Mm.
I I was initially hesitant. I was like, do we really need more Gene stories? Yes, we need more Gene stories. That's a
Oh yeah,
great character. And
yeah.
the layers of personality and identity that she, sort of embodies and portrays, and then sort of like her own internal struggles, visualized perfectly for the conflict of this episode and just really likable. I thought
Yeah.
I thought she was better than she's ever been portrayed, period. Like,
Oh, I agree. I
live
agree.
action, animated. Yeah.
And shout out to the great Commander Shepard herself, Jennifer Hale as the new Jean Grey. So
Yeah.
yeah, like her performance is awesome, and what they do with her character, we won't reveal too much of, but obviously, but the ways that I also love the ways that they're still pulling from famous storylines in the comics that they haven't gotten to, which is exactly what
Yeah.
they start to do with her, and
Super
which is
cool.
also was also very much the nature of the original show. Like I know I've talked to you a lot about how this show, at least for me, was and also to an extension, like the Spider-Man animated series. Those were my windows into a lot of these Marvel like famous book storylines because I didn't really have access to a comic book shop early, like as a kid early on. Most of my avenue were these shows and like the trading cards and the
Yeah.
backstories behind them. And I I love that at least as an adaptation of the comics. Obviously they tone things down to make them family friendly, but they were pulling from Dark Phoenix. They were pulling from Days of Future Past. They were with subtle changes, obviously, because they had stuff like like MORPH, who was a new character and stuff like that. They had to adapt things, but this is more or less it was like a rundown of like proper Marvel history in a lot of ways.
So cool.
And I love
Absolutely.
that this new series is still doing that.
You touched on a little bit, but but the Easter eggs, it's like when the X-Men animated series, ran, it was one of the only places to get quality superhero storylines. There were
Yeah,
other shows like it, but a lot of them, like the Fantastic Four show, like the Silver Surfer show, they didn't have the staying power that this did. But now you can't watch 5 minutes of Peacemaker without seeing a couple of references to other projects. So
yeah.
I thought that it was very playfully done, like you said, the way that Morph would change into characters from the comics and the old episodes. And there's a scene where Jean is going through like her closet and talking about old outfits, and I haven't worn this since blah blah blah. And I don't know, it
Yeah,
just
she
was
holds
like
up like the Phoenix outfit at some point, right, or something.
it's not the Phoenix outfit, it's the outfit that she wore when the Shi'ar Empire was hunting her for being the Phoenix, and it
Oh, that's
was
right.
a retro look from like an old,
With that
Silver
green
Age
mask.
comics. Yeah, the
Yeah.
kind of sprite looking masks.
Oh
So I
yeah.
don't know. I thought all the Easter eggs felt fun. I felt like they acknowledge old timers like you and me just enough, but not so much that you'd have to know what's going on.
Yeah, not so much that you're feeling left out too, because I know a lot of people feel that way when they're watching, especially like a lot of people would say that about the MCU, for example, or just a lot of things that are interconnected. They feel like, oh, I'm not going to get this if I haven't seen this, which also in general, I feel like people worry too much about that kind of stuff. I think a lot of these things are able to stand on their own legs, and even if you're not getting all these little references, but this show very much carries that same kind of torch that the original show did too, where they would inject these little things here and there that rewarded the fans who knew, oh, that Morph is Deadpool right now, like when
Right.
in that scene from the original show when he's just changing into people from Wolverine's past, and you see Omega Red, you see Sabretooth, you see Deadpool. And this show is very much in that same vein too. Like, yeah, it's like didn't Morph like briefly turn to Spiral at some point too? And even if you don't know the Mojo episodes, it's like you don't need to. You just know that like he's just having fun pulling from random people from their history and just
Yeah.
making random appearances. And
The morph
um,
cameos were cute and fun. I
yeah.
definitely think so. And so, number nine, one thing I really liked is I want to say the fashion and like the new looks of characters. You touched on it a bit. So Jubilee, they gave her, kind of more Asian features than she had in the animated series. And I think it looks perfect. Like, I mean, that the character feels right for the first time. In
Yeah,
my heart anyway. Like I never really vibed with the old look. But then Morph is now described on the website as a non-binary character. And like, why wouldn't you be, by the way? If you like,
yeah.
I like to think everyone who has the power to shape change would probably be non-binary because
Well, they're probably
you
the perfect character to be that for. Yeah.
yeah, and I can't believe some people are still mad about that. It's like, come on, dude. Like you shouldn't be watching X-Men. But
Right.
then, so he
Yeah,
has
exactly.
the
You're probably not getting the point of a lot of
or you should
you know
really really be watching X-Men and pay attention because maybe he's got a
Yeah.
lesson for you. So he has like the gray, it's like a non-binary face. It has really no features to it. It's kind of mannequin-esque. Storm's new mohawk. Um,
Yeah, pulling from that look from the comics, she looks fire in it too.
yeah,
Looks really cool.
let me know in the comments, guys, because once after you watch it, I'm not a big fan of the new Magneto look. I think that's the one rare miss, but it's a look, and I'm happy for some people to like it and to cosplay it
It's a
because
little cheesy.
those gloves go all the way up.
I mean, it's a little cheesy, but also like, isn't it also pulling from a similar costume from the comics
Yeah,
too? And also
yeah.
mention, I don't know, like I just love that he's just letting that mane flow. You don't see that helmet, you just see
Oh, the
that
hair,
full mane of hair.
Magneto. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Magneto. And then
oh yeah.
lastly, number 10, it seems like it was a little small deal, but it's a big deal to me. Public school teacher. I don't have as much time as I used to back in the 90s. The runtime. Some
Hmm.
part of me thought, oh, they'll probably do this as like an hour-long show because all shows are an hour long. Or I was like, it's just half an hour. Is it going to feel too rushed? Is it going to feel like it doesn't have time to breathe? I think the writing, I think Bo DeMeo has done like a great job spearheading the show, and
Hmm.
eh, these half-hour episodes feel jam-packed. They feel longer than half an hour. The amount of
Yeah,
plot and character growth and story arc that you get. X-Men, the old show, was notorious for cliffhanger endings and to be
yeah,
continued. If we're
yep,
being
yep.
honest, they probably did it too much. So I couldn't believe that this show, with what we get in episode 3, I won't spoil it, but like that could have been a 2 or 3 episode arc easy, and they still
Sure.
managed to do it in half an hour and leave me just spent in the best way. So
Well, in a weird way to bring up, that's why I don't miss that they're not doing the previously on. It just means we get more of granted, yeah, you're right. They're not running, it's not more than just your standard kind of half hour, made for television kind of length, but they make use of it, and they make use of it well. It moves at a beautiful clip. I'm
well,
I'm sad to know we're only going to get 10 of these, at least with this season. But from what I understand, I think another season's already been greenlit. I'm like, just all right, bring it on.
I think though, like, there's a reason SpongeBob isn't 40 minutes long. You know what I mean? Like it
Mm.
is more palpable to a young audience. It can make this be part. I mean, honestly, hot take, Disney, if you haven't decided this yet, release these Saturday morning. Oh my gosh, I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Recreate Saturday morning phenomena with people are going to sit down with their children Saturday morning and watch X-Men. Brian, is that a genius idea? That's
Well,
genius,
I mean,
right?
sure, no, most definitely. Well, I mean, the people who are still
Or at
have
least
like
maybe like the first
cable.
one or the last one. Yeah, I guess so. I
Yeah.
guess so. But
Well, I mean, but
anyways,
at the same time, like we're in a different era. Obviously, many people are going to be consuming this and streaming in their own time. But you
yeah,
can still, but I'm just glad that at least especially in the case of my sister who has a couple young boys now, that she gets to show, be nerding out with them too about the show that she grew up on,
it's
and
so heartwarming.
yeah, it may not be like tuning in exactly at Saturday morning type of thing, but they can watch a Saturday morning and get some cereal together and recreate that experience. But for a new generation, I'm just so glad that we have a show that is so brilliantly poised to bring back all these OG fans and be a jumping in point for a whole new generation of kids who are gonna finally kind of understand what we're all raving about when we talk about it.
And it's wild because your sister's kid, when the X-Men live action movie comes out, might think like, oh, this is the live action version of X-Men 97. Like
Yeah,
there are kids who will be jumping in on this point, and I think that you're gonna love it. I mean,
yeah.
I'm X-Men's back, Brian. Like it never really went away, but it
No.
until now it's never truly come back. So,
Oh my God, yeah. And
you
I think
know,
as soon as a lot of people listening, as soon as they see, like, at the very least, once they get to that Sentinel fight, yeah, if they're
nah,
not cheering, I don't know what's wrong with them.
yeah. So I think that's all 10 for this episode of the Old Switcharoo Screen Time. I think that's a wrap, unless Brian, did you want to say anything else about the show?
No, I just can't wait till we get to watch more, and it's gonna be over so fucking fast, man. 10 episodes. 10
But
episodes. But
it's
I'm glad they're already talking about more. Yeah.
That means that we can do an all-day marathon though, because if there's, only 10 or 12 episodes, like you can do all those at half an hour a piece.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah,
awesome.
definitely. Yeah. I'm
Well,
into marathon this, so especially once they're all done. So
so thank you for joining me. I just it's so good I had to talk to somebody about it, and I couldn't talk to anyone but you. I'm so happy to get you on our show in some fashion, and I hope you'll join us again. You want to tell our listeners where they
absolutely.
can find your stuff?
Oh, so I'm on Instagram at Bryan with a Y dot S dot Lee. I'm also on YouTube as Bryan Lee. I was able to get that without any dots or my middle initial. But yeah, that's more or less where you can find me. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so glad we have X-Men back, Jeremy.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
They're back and they're better than ever. Yeah,
That's true. It sounds a cliche, but it's actually true, guys.
they
Oh,
really
I'm so
are.
excited for you, the listener, to watch this. So everyone join us next time. Mike and I are going to do another episode of our Light Switch series. I'll be talking about the new Splatoon 3 expansion, and I can't wait to see what wacky game Mike brings to the table. Also, don't forget to visit www.theoldswitcharoo.com. That's AROO.com. There you can find links to our Spotify, our Discord, YouTube, TikTok, and all the social medias you can shake a joystick at. You can even leave an old-timey voicemail, meaning we would literally love to hear from you. Please like, comment, subscribe, and review. And as always, thanks for listening to the Old Switcharoo. We've been not talking gaming, but we have been talking retro with what's normally Mike and Jaymo.
And well, I'm not Mike.
But I'm Jaymo. Game on, everyone.
Bye bye.